We can't speak with much certainty about who exactly struck the Kerchensky bridge. The Ukrainian reaction looks confused and ambiguous. On the one hand, we see victorious social media posts from government officials, but on the other hand, after a few hours later, deny any involvement in the explosion.
Crimea and the bridge is just the beginning. Everything illegal must be taken down. The Crimean bridge formed the most intense part of the conflict that has taken place in the Russian Federation. It's just difficult to say exactly who in the special services decided to play this card.
But neither can we throw out any of the other versions that have come our way so far, as the facts remain insufficient. The explosion on the Kerchensky bridge was a strike on something sacred and important, not just for Putin, but for millions of other Russians as well. Theoretically, at least, it could be the work of the president of Russia himself, with the objective of motivating Russian society as a whole, of unifying people around their national leader. Could he do that? Overnight on the 8th of September in 1999, an apartment complex was blown up in Moscow. This was on Guryanova Street. It was followed by explosions at another Moscow address on the Kashirsky Highway and later again in the city of Volgodonsk. Vladimir Putin was prime minister when the explosions occurred. Within hours, authorities laid the blame for these monstrous crimes at the feet of Chechens. And by September 30th, federal troops began pouring into Chechnya for the Second Chechen War. It was the image of an iron-willed Chekist able to defend Russia from terrorists with a strong hand that was prepared to grip the nation after the weak and sickly Yeltsin that brought Putin to power. Discussions around the Crimean bridge today bring up memories of those terrorist acts in Russia at the end of the 1990s. Those who are convinced of participation of the secret services say, if he could do it back then, he can do it now. I don't know whether Vladimir Putin had any direct relationship to the deaths of hundreds of people in those buildings. I just know that I lived at 19 Guryanova Street, and at the time of the explosion, my mother was at home. Her remains were never found. In all the years since, the president never came to a memorial service, never spoke in memory of the deceased, never even pronounced the names of those who were killed in the most pathetic way possible while sleeping in their beds. For Putin and his underlings, such problems simply don't exist. In the place where our home once stood, 4 new apartment block towers were erected. This is not an attempt to draw any kind of conclusions. Rather, what I see here is a total lack of empathy. I would not be surprised if the first version of events around Kerchensky Bridge appear to be true. But there is a second version that somebody inside, somebody from the bloc of Siloviki, maybe Defense Ministry of Intelligence, decided to humiliate the colleagues from Federal Security Service. This version is the one put forward by Mikhail Podolyak, official advisor to the Zelensky administration in Kiev.
And now the FSB is trying to eliminate the leadership of the Defense Ministry and the military. Before the change in personnel, the FSB was down for the count. They'd missed the bridge bombing. The Department of Defense can now blame the FSB for the future loss of the South. Isn't it obvious who was behind the explosion? The truck was coming from the Russian Federation.
But for now, the most plausible version of the events is the following. Vladimir Putin's holy construction project, his super expensive baby, was heavily crippled and nearly destroyed by Ukrainian special forces. My best guess is that Western powers are against this type of actions by Kiev, which in turn requires Zelensky and his office to refrain from public commentary about the bridge. However, there was no holding back when it came to the endless stream of social media memes and short videos about the bridge, the explosion, and the Russian president's big 70th birthday the day before.
А моста как не бывало.
Где же мост? О, нету твоего моста. Я спрашиваю, где мой мост?
По моей команде на счет 3. 1, 2, 3.
Now, for how the West is reacting. In the US, in Germany, in France, and in countless other governments of the progressive world, there is once again fear of antagonizing Putin, a fear that seems to be justified because now they are obliged to seek off ramps and call for abundant caution. But of course, this raises the simple question, isn't it a bit too late for that already?
В случае продолжения попыток проведения на нашей территории терактов, ответы со стороны России будут жесткими и по своим масштабам будут соответствовать уровню угроз, создаваемых Российской Федерацией.
What is crucial in understanding Putin is that he is obsessed. He firmly decided to occupy Ukraine, to take Kiev. This is his white whale, and he will continue to act on the basis of this decision, whether the Crimean bridge burns or not. It is also crucial to remember that there can be absolutely no justification for killing civilians, but for those who died that morning on the Kerchensky Bridge, just like the rest of those who have perished in this war in Kiev and Lviv, in Donetsk and Luhansk, in Izium and in Bucha, literally everywhere, those deaths are all on the conscience of the leadership of the Russian Federation. The Russian Federation, in violation of international law, annexed a chunk of foreign territory and after 8 years attacked its neighbor with treachery. Vladimir Putin bears responsibility for the deaths of 350 children and tens of thousands of adults. Without even using the Crimean bridge, he bombed Kiev in February and March, forcing millions of people to flee their own homes, destroying an untold number of lives. If, in response, Ukraine blows up a tractor trailer, then who are we to judge? Who are we to say, this is short-sighted, don't poke the Russian bear? Listen, if Kiev had paid service to all of the advice it was given, then it would have been under the heel of a Moscow-installed puppet a long time ago. And Russian forces would have moved right up to the Moldova border in a direct threat to the European Union. I understand if a great segment of viewers here watching are deeply troubled by images of a burning bridge, but I call on you to remember under which circumstances exactly this bridge was built. And if there hadn't been a wide-scale war in Ukraine in the first place, the bridge would have gone untouched. Just imagine, right up until Ukraine was invaded, the West was ready to launch Nord Stream 2. And now, not only is there no more Nord Stream 2, there is no more Nord Stream 1. The Russian president severed all ties and ruined international projects that Russia had invested billions of dollars in. He cut off any possibility of a retreat and, by his own doing, trapped himself in a corner. Ukraine has every right to fight to the end. Ukraine will never forgive Russia for these exploded apartment blocks, nor for the screams of children and their fearful parents, nor dead bodies in the streets. The strikes of the Russian armed forces destroyed children's playgrounds, and the nightmare won't end until Putin is stopped by force.